I'm Sundar. I'm the Director for Business Development at AWS India, and that covers areas like migrations and modernization, some of our specialist products like AI/ML, analytics, IoT, etc. And in talking about the key vertical areas where we will be focusing on. So we continue to see momentum in quite a few areas which we think will get expanded considerably. BFSI, if I were to break it down, it started for us with NBFCs and insurance. That's where we had the initial uplift in terms of people moving to the cloud. This started about 5-6 years back, and it was driven by a lot of innovation happening in that space, with customers wanting to go beyond just the top end of the market to smaller towns, the next strata of customers and so on, offering them new products and services and processes that would be more suited to that kind of a market in terms of how to capture data, which will be in those considerably larger volumes to analyze them. So that was the sort of starting point, if you will. And then in recent times, we've seen a lot of banks also adopting, because we've seen that banks are also looking at cloud as a strategic investment for them, because it is allowing them to scale, it's allowing them to innovate, it's allowing them to operate at different price points for a different class of products and services. So we see an acceleration starting there, and over the course of the next few years, banking is one space where we expect there's going to be a very rapid uptake. Capital markets, we've seen a lot of uptake in recent times. In the last year or two, we've seen a lot of capital markets customers where they've seen that some of the new entrants into the market, the digital players, they have been able to capture the attention of the market because they've come in with products and services which are very suited to a digitally savvy audience, which are operating at price points which are quite different to the kind of SIP entry points that used to exist in the market prior to that. So that's another space where we expect there's going to be a bit of a revolution happening in the course of the next few years, when core systems also to some extent will start moving to the cloud. The other area where we've seen a lot of innovation is in the manufacturing space, where customers, they looked at 3 different types of use cases to get to the cloud. So there were customers like Seat Tires who started with moving a core system like SAP to the cloud. And then around that, they have built a whole lot of innovation, but that was the starting point. The other customers who started by taking analytics first to the cloud, like people like Apollo Tyres, for example, they put up a data lake. Eventually, they also moved SAP to the cloud, but that was a secondary step. And then the third is where people build net new capabilities on the cloud. So somebody like Ashok Leyland, for example, who have put their telematics on cloud, that is where they are creating something new that didn't exist before. So those are the 3 motions that we have seen within manufacturing. And even within manufacturing, we have seen auto and auto component manufacturers and CPG companies being at the fore. One other sector which I should definitely call out is the ISVs and the ITES companies. See, the ISVs, when they are catering to both Indian and global markets, the kind of scale that they need to operate at, the fact that there is increased cost consciousness from customers, which is getting them to lower the price point at which they offer, is also getting them to modernize and move a lot of their technology to managed open source as a way of lowering the price point at which they operate for their end customers. And with ITES companies, while they are, they are different to ISVs in that their starting point is not a piece of software which they are selling. It's more of end-to-end services. Even there, we are seeing in pockets, people are picking up things that have been built for certain customers, which are repeatable, which are reusable, and then converting them into reusable assets and porting those to the cloud. And that is another motion that we have seen has been very, sort of accelerating the cloud adoption in that segment in a big way.
Okay, so you're giving examples in the BFSI, starting from NBFCs, capital markets to banks. You've talked about an insurance manufacturing as well as ITS now. Generic across all the verticals. Mm-hmm. Typically, some of the use cases that you mentioned, there are applications on public cloud like AWS. Though some banks are even moving their core applications, but there are still a lot of applications which are on the private cloud. and even the banks or enterprises are managing multiple applications across multiple cloud providers.
Yes.
So there will be multiple public cloud providers, there will be hybrid cloud, there will be certain applications on the edge. So this sort of management, in terms of the challenges in managing that, as well as ensuring that productivity is optimized at that. So what sort of support or assistance is being given to the CIOs in that aspect?
Yeah. So look, I think 2-3 things, right? I think first and foremost is we tell clients that try and think in terms of a primary cloud provider. While we could have multiple cloud providers, but a primary cloud provider, because that just makes for them the management a lot easier. That's number one. Number two, regardless of which cloud you go with, certain practices at a generic level customers have to adopt, like setting up a cloud center of excellence, like setting up a FinOps practice, setting up an architecture office. These are activities that we help our customers with. So, for example, when our professional services goes in and works with clients to help them, for example, say, inculcate, let's say, governance practices in their development teams from day one. That is something that is a bare minimum skill set and learning that we believe all customers should have, regardless of how they split their workloads between different clouds. So that's number two. Number three is, it's not just the one time of setting up that governance, but also then subsequently providing solutions where clients are able to make informed choices. See, because we always believe that ultimately it comes back to our customer's choice. Nobody can force them into anything. So whether it be, for example, we have our own, for example, native analytics solutions, but we also support ISVs like Snowflake or Databricks, which are not necessarily tied only to a cloud provider, but in a given customer situation, if that is the right solution, because the customer has a particular requirement which is more suited to that technology, we will help them adopt those technologies like Snowflake or Databricks and so on, which are our ISV partners.
How realistically that is happening? The idea that you mentioned that there should be a sort of an anchor cloud provider, and then you might have multiple other CSPs. The organization is working, but in terms of practical adoption, how much you are witnessing that is happening right now?
That's actually the dominant motion right now, because most people started with a cloud provider. Which was their anchor, and then they might look at doing a few capabilities from other cloud providers, and that again will be driven by customer choice. But it's very rarely that a customer will say from day one that they are going to go. I mean, there are a few customers who do that, no doubt, but most customers, because look, cloud adoption itself is a new thing, and on top of that we are talking about modernization, etc., which means you're not just doing a lift and shift. And on top of that, if you say multiple cloud, all of it on day one, in many cases, that's just too many variables coming into play on day one. So many customers will try and minimize the number of variables on day one. So we do see the adoption of a primary cloud provider is the dominant motion. And even within that, customers take very informed choices now about what to do as a lift and shift, because that is relatively lower risk as compared to, let's say, completely revamping an application. But we are seeing that customers are making very informed choices.
But here the challenge is what the scenario that you are explaining, this will be more applicable for the greenfield kind of applications. But most customers, like even in the keynote we heard, the top 100 companies, 88 companies are AWS customers. So there the motion, and it's easy to assume that these companies are fairly mature on their technology evolution. So, and they will have certain platforms already there existing. So for them to adopt this motion of this one anchor cloud provider and working around that, how challenging is that? Because there will be multiple levels of migrations now involved for these. If it's a greenfield one, fine, you can work around that.
See, again, let's understand that even those who are mature today were greenfield at one point in time. Right? So when they started, they also made similar choices. And most of them recognize the fact that having an anchor cloud as a starting point is the most sensible decision to make. So what we are seeing is, to your point, yes, you're right that some of these clients have now reached a level of maturity where
Exactly.
they can make more informed choices about whether how much they want to continue to invest on the anchor cloud and how much they want to look beyond the anchor cloud. But we do continue to see that actually the decision making is now evolving to a slightly different nuance, which is how much do I take it as it is, which is lift and shift vis-a-vis modernization. So we are seeing that the debate has now shifted more in that direction because customers are increasingly seeing that the true value that they can get comes when they are using the cloud to the fullest capability, which is using native services to build net new modern applications or take old applications and modernize them using net new capabilities. So now we see the debate shifting more in that direction. I mean, it's not to say that the multi-cloud discussions are not happening, they are. But the modernization versus lift and shift, that is where we are seeing the pivot is increasingly shifting.
Okay. Another major aspect, and you gave the example also about the manufacturing sector. I'm talking about the security aspect. Say, let's take manufacturing as an example. The shifting of the SAP or those core systems to the cloud, okay, that is happening. But the security challenges now, a lot of these manufacturing setups, the auto setups, they would have sensors, and the OT part of the security is now becoming a serious challenge. While the IT security is fairly evolved, the OT part of the security is not so. So how can you help sort of customers, especially in the manufacturing and infrastructure sector, to work around that sort of secure scenario?
Okay, so see, first thing is, it's important to note that in AWS we always say that security is our day zero job. Right? I mean, we were built on that philosophy and that continues to drive everything we do. Second thing is, whenever we build our capabilities, whether it be edge IoT capabilities or whether it be ML capabilities like training algorithms running in the backend, it doesn't make a difference. From our point of view, we are always trying to build in security into the services from day one, rather than as an afterthought and as a bolt-on. So that's number two. Number three is, we always urge our clients that whenever you, especially to your point about areas like OT, which are slightly later to come to cloud, right? Because you have edge requirements in terms of latency, etc.
And there are a lot of legacy kind of equipment,
legacy MES systems, proprietary formats, etc. We tell customers that make an informed choice about where you want to see what setting. Right now, if for example you need us to put AWS Greengrass, which is our capability which sits at the edge, where we can securely run, for example, machine learning algorithms to intercept data coming from the factory shop floor in real time, rather than have it come back to the cloud and add a few milliseconds of latency. If you want that interception happening then and there, and action being taken then and there, we can do that in secure fashion. Or if you say that some of that data I need to send back to the cloud, because those are exceptions which need to go into my SAP or whatever ERP I'm using, or that needs to go into my training algorithm to tweak my algorithms and so on, because I saw some unusual values in some process, etc. That also we do in a highly secured fashion. But the most important thing we tell customers is, and I think you kind of touching upon that is, look at the security in a holistic way. It can't just be for a set of applications. So when we go to customers, we conduct security workshops where we talk to them about this journey that they'll be making to the cloud. If it's over a 2-year period, what are the various security checkpoints that they need to look at as and when they adopt capabilities on the cloud, right? Whether that's net new capability or whether that is migrating an older application and modernizing it or whatever. What are those checkpoints they need to add? Right? And we also conduct what are called as well-architected reviews, WAR in our terminology, where we look at multiple aspects. We look at resilience, we look at operational excellence, we look at cost, but security is one of the key pillars of that well-architected review, where our solution architects will come sit with our clients and say, after conducting the well-architected review, that here are 2 or 3 areas in which you need to tighten your security. And we do that on an ongoing basis. And we also strongly urge customers to have their own security practice as part of that larger governance that they need to look at. And we also help customers to set up, as I mentioned, when we set up the governance, we make security as a very strong pillar of it. So it's important, therefore, to look at it holistically rather than look at it piecemeal in terms of how am I going to secure my analytics separately, how will I secure my IoT separately, how will I secure my embedded technology in my devices separately. It has to be seen holistically. That's what we urge customers.
And when you're talking about these governance centers, many of these sectors are highly regulated.
Yes.
So there are these regulatory requirements which you need to have compliances with. So how do you help the customers in?
Yes. So what we do is we work very closely with the regulators. We have a public policy team. So we provide our inputs in terms of what technology can do to help enhance the regulatory frameworks in terms of helping with data protection, in terms of compliance, in terms of data localization, etc. We have an ongoing dialogue with them. So that is true for all the regulators that we work with. So when we work with clients, we are able to give them an informed point of view in terms of here are the requirements as defined by the regulator, and how does our technology help to meet those requirements. And then during the actual onboarding process, typically it will be a very well-trained partner of ours who will be doing that actual onboarding for the customer, or it will be our professional services who can then ensure that whatever is there in that checklist, which says here are the 20 requirements, here is how we're meeting them, that how do we actually implement those. So the public policy team and our security team, we have a fully established security team. They are constantly having this debate with our customers, our partners and our regulators.
Okay, and another, initially in beginning you mentioned AI/ML is another motion that you are witnessing, and now all the talk is about generative AI.
Yes.
We've even heard in the, so in terms of, lot of talks are there, but in terms of mainstream adoption, what is the scenario you are witnessing, and maybe one or two referenceable use cases if you can give.
References, I don't know if we are yet ready because it's very new technology. Let me see if we can share something. But if I look at the mainstream use cases, right? I mean, we are seeing, okay, let me take a step back here. I think the first and foremost is to recognize that in many cases, when a new technology comes along, it takes a little bit of time before the body of knowledge builds up around it in terms of how to use it, etc. But the advantage we in Amazon have is that we've been using AI/ML in many ways for the last 20 plus years. So whether it is drones for doing delivery, whether it is Alexa, whether it is Amazon Go stores where you can pick up what you want and walk out and the ML will recognize what you have picked up. We've had this capability there for a long time. So when we bring technology to the market, it already embodies a lot of learning that has gone into it. Like for example, Amazon Forecast, which is one of our solutions, is based on technology similar to what we use within Amazon for our own forecasting. So that automatically brings that the muzzle of Amazon's capabilities to the table. That's point number one. Point number two is when we have worked with clients, to your point about mainstream usage as against casual usage. In mainstream usage, we heard three things from customers. One, do not push us into a particular model. Give us choice in terms of models. So when we launched our Bedrock solution, we've given customers that choice. We've said either you can use Titan, which is our LLMs, or we will provide you the connections to the well-known models in the market. Okay, things like, for example, Anthropic or AI21. So we give customers that choice, number one. Number two, there is a serious concern at senior levels in customers that if we went down this path, would our proprietary data get leaked out because it is used for training or whatever. So the way we operate is, if somebody wants to implement Bedrock for themselves, they have a copy of that running within their VPC. So whatever data goes into it is protected as part of any other data that is given strong protection within the VPC. So you may have a regular LLM, but you're customizing it with your own data, and that is happening purely within your VPC. So that gives customers greater confidence about trying it. That's number two. And number three is, if you look at the various use cases, customers want choice. For example, there are customers where a standard LLM will not cut it because it's an extremely specialized field, like let's say genomic research or cancer research, where you can't just take an LLM and use it. You got to custom build and train your own LLM. So there we provide the infrastructure capabilities for customers to build it out, whether it's our Inferentium chips or our Inferentia or our Trainium chipsets. So that is something we do. And then there's the in-between layer, if you will, where customers are saying, we either want to use standard LLMs or we want to customize those for our requirements. So that is where Bedrock brings in both our LLMs as well as these third-party LLMs. And then there is the third layer where customers are saying, give us something ready-made. So where we don't have to actually go and build something, more like an app that can be used like that. So our Code Whisperer is an example. So Code Whisperer, it is meant for helping programmers to take out the drudge in a lot of the standard tasks that we do. And keeping in mind the whole security angle, we also do security scans, which is quite unique. In that we don't just provide you a piece of snippet of code, but we also scan it for potential security flaws and so on, so that customers are a lot more confident about then integrating that piece into their code. And our internal tests have shown that it takes a developer 43% and 57% less time, effectively 57% more productive because of the use of Code Whisperer. So we are giving customers that choice about where they want to play. So some customers might say, I also want to use a Code Whisperer, but I also want to use your LLM for, let's say, customized basis. We are more than happy to do that.
But the first choice that you mentioned, where you are giving the customer's choice to work on any platform. How far is the industry ready when there are multiple solution providers coming with different platforms? So that in that customer scenario, each of these platforms will be sort of talking to each other.
Yes. Yeah, it's an evolving field, right? You're right that it's not something that's going to be ready on day one. It's a very rapidly evolving field. So currently we support a set of models. We'll send you that list. It includes Anthropic, AI21, etc. And in the fullness of time, we expect more and more models to come in, which will be at industrial grade strength. We also evaluate to see what is it that our customers are asking. Right? So we don't just say, okay, let's pick up these 5 models and put them in there. It's based on deep customer research to understand what is it that they want. So whatever we have embedded right now is based on what we have been hearing from customers. And even going forward, that will continue. So even if you see within our Titan LLMs, where there are 2 LLMs, it is being based on what we are hearing from customers. So those 2 LLMs are different use cases. One is what is called as the embedded LLM. So the embedded LLM is more for helping with things like search, where you do a natural language search. It's not meant to generate text for you, but it's meant to take your search string or your search language and then parse it to figure out what is your actual intent, and then based on that try and get you the most relevant content. So that is one LLM. And the other is a more regular generative AI LLM, which is meant for generating text. So where, for example, you provide a picture and ask it to provide a description, or let's say there's a bunch of documents and you want to produce a summary of that and so on. So that's why we have been listening to customers and giving that choice. So to answer your question, I think in the fullness of time, more and more models will be demanded by the market, and the ones that are more mature in terms of their security, in terms of their capability, in terms of their scalability, those are the ones that we will end up adding into the Bedrock family of
But where is the challenge? Say before these models came up, you initially talked about a center of governance and a sort of a governance mechanism that you have put in place. Now once these sort of generative AI models, these are coming in, that will change the, if I may say, the status quo in that governance. So how do you now sort of convince the, because from a customer standpoint, it's a complete overhaul again happening. So how do you manage that for the customers?
Okay. See, again, it's an evolving thing. I don't think we all fully understand the implications of the technology yet. But I think the important thing to note is that it will not be a full-fledged overhaul. Because what you're doing for your core systems will continue. What you're doing for your net new application development, etc., is largely going to continue. It's specifically in the space of Gen AI and therefore the data security that goes with it. How do you ensure there's no bias? How do you ensure there's no abuse, etc.? Additional layers are likely to get added to the governance rather than junk the existing governance and start from scratch. That's unlikely to happen. Now, as this field is evolving and we are in touch with customers, we are in touch with regulators, we do also have our pulse on how the thought processes there are evolving. And we will embody those in our governance practices, in the advice that we give our customers, in the way we embed it into our technology to ensure that we make it safe and abuse-free. So it's something that will evolve in the fullness of time.
And in terms of the thing is, two challenges. One, especially when we are talking about new models, people with relevant skill sets to sort of, even from an AWS perspective, to deploy that in organizations. And the other things which the COVID had done is forever this work from anywhere kind of environment. I don't think there is any organization now which is a completely on-premise kind of working model anymore. So there are heterogeneous devices, heterogeneous network. Yes. So in that, how are these things will be reconciled in those two scenarios, this work from anywhere kind, and whether at all relevant skill set, enough of the relevant skill sets people are there?
See, the skill set is more directly related to the Gen AI point. Right? Work from anywhere will affect a broader swathe of IT capabilities, not just the Gen AI part. So let me therefore answer it in two parts. Right? On the Gen AI side, look, we've already trained 4 million people in the country on AWS technologies. And we are always listening to customers.
But not all of them are the Gen AI capabilities.
I'm talking about what we have done totally so far. Right? Because this is predating a whole bunch of capabilities. I'm talking about over the last 4 to 5 years. But the point I'm making here is that these 4 million, we have been very deliberate and thoughtful about what are the skill sets in which we are helping train the base of our developers and customers, because we are listening to feedback, right? So as we see the feedback coming for those skill sets, we will ramp up our delivery capability. We will hire, we will train our own people first, to your point, because if our people have to go out and train others, they have to first of all be competent in the technology themselves. So that's something that we will consistently do. So even in the past, when something like serverless came out for the first time, or something like Redshift came out for the first time, and there was a spurt of interest, like Graviton when it first came out, there was a spurt of interest. So we caught up with those cycles, and we stayed ahead of those cycles in many ways by enabling our customers, our partners, our developer communities, etc. We'll continue to do that. The point you make about work from anywhere, that's a more nuanced point, because that applies not just to Gen AI, but it applies to just about everything, right? So it is actually, and to your point, that's one of the things which has caused customers to go back and review their governance practices.
Exactly.
Because earlier you had everybody coming into the office and doing something, or at least on company mandated devices. Now it is, like you said, work from anywhere. It could be bring your own device. So the practices on security, the practices on compliance have evolved accordingly. For example, if you're doing call center operations from home during COVID, how do I know somebody can't take a photograph of that screen and steal data? So how do I ensure that we are redacting certain data which is sensitive, and unless they specifically request for it, we will not allow that redaction to be removed. So those are things that got added as the threats started to evolve. So I think the key here is that we have a security team, we have a policy team, which is constantly looking at how is the market evolving, how are the regulators evolving, how are the standards evolving, and therefore trying to stay ahead of that by embedding or embodying those into our technology, our practices, and that will continue. So to me, whether it is for Gen AI or whether it is for accessing, let's say, an analytics application from your own mobile phone, or whether it is to look at corporate data when you are traveling somewhere and you're carrying your laptop with you, those are all threats which have to be taken very seriously. What if that device got stolen tomorrow? So we are constantly looking at how do we predict what are the likely challenges we're going to face in the next 3, 6, whatever number of months, or a year plus, whatever, and then try and build those capabilities into our solutions, and also then share our understanding, our point of view with the regulators, so that they are getting a broad swathe of opinions based on which they can form their guidelines, their standards, etc.
And lastly, I'd like to ask, from an application perspective, if we look at the next, say, 18 to 24 months, what are going to be the 2 or 3 key focus areas?
Okay, so I think, are you asking this from a market application point of view or AWS?
AWS point of view.
See, AWS, obviously, we are going to focus a lot on modernization. Right? So helping customers modernize their existing applications, helping them build out net new capabilities, bringing in tools like Code Whisperer so that we make that process a lot faster. There's going to be an enormous focus there, because the number of net new applications that are going to be built to surround these core applications to drive capability there, because customers recognize that trying to modernize the core is a slow, long process, but building those capabilities around the core and integrating them through an API gateway is a lot faster. So we expect there's going to be enormous investments happening there, and we are definitely going to help our customers there. And obviously, GenAI and the GenAI cannot be taken in isolation, right? It has to be seen in the context of a broader data strategy. So what would that mean for data collection systems? What would that mean for the security around that? What would that mean for the scale requirements? So that's an area where, again, we're going to put in a lot of focus. I think that's going to be a critical space. We're also seeing huge interest in connected products. So where, there is device embedding, how do we collect that data in a secure way? How do we do it in a very low latency way? How does that link to 5G private networks, for example? We also discussed with telecoms about how to work with them in terms of taking 5G private network solutions to clients in various industries. So those are the kind of things that we are expecting to see a lot of emphasis on in the course of next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.